Okay, so take a look at this map here. This is a map of internet usage around the world, and the darker the green, the more concentrated the internet usage. So where do you see some of the darkest green? North America. How about these countries up here? What are they? The dark green ones. Scandinavia in that area. Okay, so we see a lot of dark green, and we see some light green, right? So they estimate that at the end of this decade, over 5 billion people in the United States will have access to the internet via their mobile phones, laptops, those kinds of things. Anybody know about how many billions of people in the world? 7.2 or so billion. So we have a lot of internet usage, right, in the United States and around the world. Things have changed quite a bit. So let me ask you a question. I need to get you guys talking a little bit. So here's the question. Your school has just received a sizable, talking big money, sizable grant for technology implementation. So here's my question. You're going to have to talk to the people next to you. If you don't know them, introduce yourself. Talk about, because you're on the Technology Implementation Committee, what would you use that sizable grant to purchase at your school? How would you use that money? Now, you're going to turn and talk, and then you're going to get out your cell phones. Oh, come on now. How can I get this to come over here? Technology. I don't know. Will it dry? Well, my thing's a little set. I'll work on this. First, you're going to turn and talk, and then hopefully, I'm going to get a poll everywhere thing going on where you're going to use your cell phones to let me know what you guys came up with as far as how you're going to use the technology. So get your phones ready, and I'll see if I can drag this while you're talking to each other. So turn and talk. How would you use that money? Okay, so you're talking, and I know this is small, but when you get an answer, it's very small. I'm sorry. You're going to get your cell phones out, and you're going to text me with your answers. And you're going to text to this number here, 37607. So that's your 2 number, 37607. Then in the text message part, you're going to type Dana Davis 413, a space in your answer. Did you get that? So that's your 2 number, 37607. And then in the text, you're going to do Dana Davis 413, space, and then type in the answers that you guys came up with. How would you spend that technology money? All right, so while we're waiting, why don't we just verbalize? What were some of your answers? Upgrades, specific, be specific for me. What kind of upgrades? CPUs. Okay, so our computers that we originally bought years ago, they need to be updated. They're slow. Okay, how many of you said something like that? Okay, good. What are some other ways that you would spend your money? Yep.
Laptops for all the teachers.
Laptops for all the teachers, not just some of the teachers. Okay. What else would we spend our money on? Smart music. How many of you would say smart boards? We could use some of those. Document cameras? Did anybody budget any of your money for IT support? Infrastructure? Okay. So you're coming up with a bunch of really good ideas. Now here's the thing. Over the last 15 years or so, I think even more than that, a lot of money has been poured into technology purchases at schools. Maybe not our Christian schools, but at the public schools have been spending lots and lots of money, millions and millions of dollars in technology, in the structure, the IT support. Here's the interesting thing. All that money has been invested in technology, and there is very little to no research to support that the increase of technology in a school will result in higher achievement in students. There's very little research to support that idea. However, there is some research to support that there is an indirect correlation. For instance, there is some research to support that if we invest in technology, we will result in having students more engaged. And there's a lot of research to show us that engaged students have higher rates of achievement. Now, what I've just told you, for many of you is, yeah, I kind of knew that, because you have been teaching in your schools for many, many years, maybe some of you, without very much technology. Howbeit, your test scores are still pretty good, right? Excellent and above excellent. So you know that intuitively. But at the same time, do those test scores on the Iowa Basic Skills, do they test everything? What are they testing? Reading and math and those kinds of skills. They're not necessarily testing public speaking or the ability to communicate, and they're not testing students in their ability to function with what we call those 21st century skills, the ability to use technology. So the idea is that although there's not a lot of research to support that there's a higher rate of achievement, there is research to show us that we're going to have more engaged students, and engaged students learn more. The thing about technology is the engagement factor is very short-lived. Do you remember getting your first smartphone and it was wonderful, and then you maybe wanted the next smartphone and the next one, right? Maybe with our students, they get their first video game and they all of a sudden want the next one. So that engagement factor is very short-lived. That's something to keep in the back of our minds. Well, we're investing a lot of technology in something, or money in something that may not have a long-lasting impact when it comes to engagement. So they've done some research trying to see the relationship between technology and student learning. And so they did a research study with a math software program. And so they gave several schools this math software program, and the idea was to see if students' achievement levels were higher. So here's the interesting part. What they realized is that the students at the schools that already had a high rate of math achievement, when they were given that software and began using it, they had a little bump in math achievement. But the students at the schools that had a relatively low rate of math achievement, when they were given that software, they didn't see any kind of increase at all in math achievement. Why? Why do you think? Let me know. What do you think? Why do you think? What makes the difference, do you think?
I guess the higher ones were motivated already.
They maybe already had a high rate of motivation. Anybody else have any ideas?
Students who didn't get the math just kept guessing.
Maybe they kept guessing. So they dug into it. Do you have an idea?
Yeah, I think it might be if they were already struggling with something and having a hard time, and you give them something else to learn.
Yeah.
So now you just put more on their plate.
So yeah, they already maybe were at a deficit. So the researchers were curious about it, and they dug in a little bit more. And here's what they found out. At that school that had a high rate of math achievement and got the software, the math software, the school also invested in the teachers and trained the teachers on how to use that math software. The schools that had a relatively low rate of achievement, those teachers did not get that same investment in training and learning how to use it. Because here's the takeaway, and here's what we want to remember. What we have to remember is that there are no technology shortcuts to good education. Absolutely no technology shortcuts. So if we think that we are going to improve everything at our school by investing a lot of money into technology, we need to stop and think about that for a minute, because technology will not ever be the solution to increased learning. Well, what is the solution? The solution is what it's always been. Research-based instructional strategies used by teachers like you that are highly skilled, highly trained professionals. When we have highly skilled professional teachers who know and have been trained, then they use technology. Suddenly then we see an increase in student achievement. So it's always and will always be about teachers and their ability to use highly effective instructional strategies. And so our focus here is going to be on looking at some of those highly effective instructional strategies that are research proven. Then we're going to say, okay, what are some technology tools that we can pull in to help support us? You say, well, but you just said that we can do well without these technology tools. Yeah, we can. But we could also maybe do better if we've got training and we use technology to engage students. I kind of think of it this way. We could all wash our clothes if we wanted to in a boiling cauldron of water, right? With the lye soap. And we could get the clothing out and rub it on the board, and we could get relatively clean clothes that way. Do you want to do it that way? No. Or we can use our high efficiency washers and dryers and get our laundry clean that way. Sort of like this with technology. Yes, students can learn math and reading and language arts and all of those skills without a whole lot of technology, and most of us can testify to that, right? But what if we have in our classes, like we do, native users of computers and technology? And what if we allowed them to use that technology to increase their learning under the guidance of a really excellent teacher? So that's where we're going to go with this. So what are these instructional strategies that work? Well, the McCrell Institute is a research institute that takes a look at education. And they did a really big study several years ago and looked at all sorts of educational research. And when it was all said and done and they looked at everything, they boiled it down to 9 instructional strategies that have been proven to be effective across all age levels and in all content areas. So I'm going to go through all of these 9, and I'm going to show you the percentage that they saw increase in learning. So the first one here is identifying similarities and differences. And when teachers use that instructional strategy and help students to use it, they saw a 45% gain in learning. The second one is summarizing and note-taking. When teachers use the strategies and encourage students to, a 34% gain in learning. Reinforcing effort and providing recognition, 29% gain. Homework and practice, a 28% gain. Non-linguistic representations, we're going to talk about that. They saw a 27% gain. Number 6 is cooperative learning, 23% gain. Setting objectives and providing feedback, a 23% gain. And generating and testing hypotheses, 23% gain. So these are all instructional strategies that have been proven to be effective regardless of the subject that you teach and regardless of the grade level that you teach. Okay, so that's interesting. So we got to put our focus on the strategies that work, the teaching strategies, and then we'll think about some technology that goes along with it. So we're going to focus today on 3 specific strategies. We don't have time to go through all 9 of them. And by the way, a lot of this that I'm sharing with you comes from a class that I co-teach with Dr. Dan Brocky in our Masters of Teaching and Learning. And the name of that class is Technology for Teaching and Learning. And so a lot of this material comes from that class. But the 3 strategies that we're going to focus on are identifying similarities and differences, 45% gain, setting objectives and providing feedback, and non-linguistic representations. So we'll go through all 3 of these, we'll talk about them, and then I'm going to show you some very easy tech tools that you can incorporate, some that you already have. So we're going to start thinking about those strategies and then how we can bring in some technology to help us. So the very first one is identifying similarities and differences. So for this, we're going to ask students to identify the similarities and differences in the content they're learning. And when we do that, it helps them to structure their understanding of that content. So what do we mean by this? I've got this nice picture here. Everybody say, oh, it's so cute. I have this little puppy and this little kitten. And I have this up here to remind us of those little guys that we've had in our lives, those children or grandchildren. And when a child first begins to speak, they realize maybe that an animal with 4 legs is a dog, right? And so then they call everything a dog, 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 dog. So you're driving around and they're in their car seat in the back and they see a cow and they call the cow dog, right? Because it's a dog. And then they see a cat and they say dog. And what do you say? No, that's not a dog, that's a cat. And so what that new speaker, beginning speaker does is they identify similarities and differences between the dog and the cat. So the dog, it looks like this, and its ears, and the cat, the whiskers, and its, oh, that's the way God designed us. When we learn new things, we are identifying similarities and differences. It's an effective instructional strategy. I suspect you're already doing a little bit of this in your classes. When you're introducing a new topic, you may say, how is this alike what we just studied? How is it different from what we just studied? Doing that is highly effective. Having the students do that is highly effective. So what are the different processes for identifying similarities and differences? The first one is comparing. So comparing is doing what? It's comparing, it's the process of identifying similarities. That's what comparing is. Classifying is when we group things. So I'd put pictures of the dogs in one category, pictures of the cats in one category. That's a process for identifying similarities and differences too. Creating metaphors. What do we mean by that? Creating metaphors is highly effective. That's the process of identifying a general or basic pattern in a specific topic and then finding another topic that appears to be quite different but has the same pattern. Let me give you an example. We're learning about bees, and you could say that the worker bee is like a construction worker. Oh, we just made a metaphor there. They kind of have an understanding of what a construction worker is, so now I better understand what the worker bee is like. So that's an example of making a metaphor. And then the final one is creating analogies, identifying relationships between relationships. Now, you remember those tests you've taken? This is to that as that is to that. Well, that is an analogy, but it's also an effective skill to help students realize the differences between things. So this is a very effective strategy to use in the classroom, whether you're teaching kindergartners or whether you're teaching high school students. So think about how are you using that? So now that we know the strategy, let's see if we can bring in some tech tools that can help us, right? Because we're going to start with teaching, and then we're going to bring in tech tools. So all sorts of different ways that you can do this. You can do this with Venn diagrams. How many of you already use Venn diagrams? Great. So Venn diagrams is a way that you show similarities and differences, and also a great way for students. Flowcharts are a great way to help students understand the relationships between different items that you're teaching. And metaphors, helping students create metaphors is a great way. So what are some tools that you can use? Well, we have to start with Microsoft Word. Raise your hand if you have Word on a computer somewhere. All right, use it. It has so much in there that we don't even use. And one of the things that it has in there is SmartArt. SmartArt is really, really handy. It's handy dandy. So here's an example of choosing SmartArt. And if you just click on Insert in Word and then SmartArt, on the left-hand side, it has relationships. And then it has all these different ways that students can show the relationship between something. That's the larger picture. That leads to deeper understanding than just rote memorization, doesn't it? For me to see the relationships between items, to make connections with what I already know. So don't forget about good old Microsoft Word that's already available. Sometimes we like to say, I just don't have any technology. You have technology, you've got Word, and your students can use it. And so remember good old Microsoft Word, and we'll be hitting on Word quite a bit as we go. Here's an example of an online website called Glyphy. And there are quite a different number of these online websites, but Glyphy is a way that you can create online flowcharts and diagrams. It's free for its most basic version. And so you can get in there and students. So I have down here, how many of you have read, oh, I can't even read it on there. What's the name of it? It's, oh, Team of Rivals. That's right. Have any of you read Team of Rivals about Abraham Lincoln? Oh, it's long. To be honest, I haven't made it through the whole thing. But basically the premise of the book is that Abraham Lincoln, who did he put on his cabinet? Are there any history people in here? He put his rivals, his political rivals on his cabinet. That's what this book is about. And so this is a Venn diagram that compares and contrasts Abraham Lincoln with his rivals. Okay, so a higher level skill, maybe for high school, but also a skill that can be done in any subject, whether you're talking about pilgrims and Thanksgiving. You know, with the students, they often get the pilgrims and Thanksgiving story every single year. And so what's a great idea is to maybe help them understand the deeper connections. And so doing that, rather than just rote memorization, helping them to see the connections. And using these kinds of resources are a great way to do that. This is Creately, which is also like Glyphly, but different. And again, tons of Venn diagrams that you can choose from. You can use them. You can encourage your students to use them. And the idea here is that if we can get students thinking a little bit more deeply about the topic, then they'll have more connections and they'll have higher rate of learning. And that's what we want, right? So let's go on to number 2. Setting objectives and providing feedback. The very first thing, our number 1, was identifying similarities and differences. So the second one we're going to cover is setting objectives and providing feedback. So what do we mean by this? Setting objectives is the process of setting a direction to guide learning. Okay, so it's when we set objectives. Now I have to admit something. When I was in undergrad, when I was studying to be a teacher, they made us write objectives. How many of you remember something like that? And I didn't really get it. I was just following the formula that they gave me, and I wrote an objective, and I turned it in. And I got an A, but I turned it in. Now that I'm a teacher and I'm out in the real world, I realize how important it is as a teacher to set objectives. What do I want students to know or be able to do? Why are we doing this? Do you ever have students ask you that? Do you have an answer? Why are we doing this? So as a teacher, if we can articulate the objectives, that's very, very, very important. It's a guide for learning. So here are some tips on how to set objectives. Remember, this is an instructional strategy that's proven to be effective. So your objectives, they need to be specific, but not restrictive. So when you set objectives for learning, make them specific, but not too restrictive. Communicate learning objectives to both students and their parents. Students want to know this? Well, you just said you got a question all the time. Why do we have to learn this? That's them saying to you, what's our objective for learning here? And so communicate those objectives to them. When students understand where we're going, then they can better understand why they're doing the different tasks that we're asking them to do. This is our end goal. This is where we're headed. Connect learning to previous learning and future learning. There's a lot of research to support this, and we talk about it a lot in our undergrad classes. Connecting and activating prior knowledge, right? And so when we set objectives for learning, that requires us to kind of connect learning to previous learning. So someone tell me, think for a minute, what are you teaching on Monday? Does anybody have a brand new topic on Monday that they're going to start teaching your students? History, math, yep. Okay, so when she introduces weathering and erosion, she's going to say, today we're going to focus on this, our objective. And then a great idea would be to activate prior learning. You remember when we did this? Or you remember when we learned about this? Let's connect it now to where we're going. That's a really effective strategy. We have to activate that prior learning so they understand where we're headed. Engage students in setting personal learning objectives. But you don't understand, Dana. We've got a curriculum we got to get to. It's really irrelevant if the students set personal learning objectives, except it's kind of not. When students set their own personal goals, then they are more motivated to accomplish those goals. It's okay to get students involved in sharing what they would like to learn about a new subject. So we're talking about weathering and erosion. What do you know? What do you want to know? Okay, all of that is very good because again, it activates and gets them involved in the process. So let's go back to Word. Word is a great tool, has lots of tech tools that you can use. Again, smart art and tables. With tables, you can create a KWHL chart. Now, how many of you are familiar with the good old KWL chart? That is the what I know, what I want to know, and what I learned. But I love this new column. How will I learn it? Oh, well, you're going to tell me, right? That's what the students would say. You're going to tell me. Or, yes, I'll be involved, but how else? Are there some books? Are there some websites? How else can we learn this? And so this was used just using a good old Microsoft Word table. Don't forget about good old Microsoft Word. So asking students what they want to know is like asking them, what do you want to learn? What are your objectives for this? So who has another topic that they're going to start on Monday or continue on Monday? Science or math or social studies? Okay, so what do you already know about that and what do you want to learn? I think sometimes Students know more than we give them credit for about the topic. And we spend a lot of time rehashing things that they already know. So helping students identify what they already know because they've covered this for several years. What do you want to know still? And let's focus on that. And how will we get there? Okay, so I love Google Drive. How many of you have a Gmail account? How many of you use Google or Google Drive or apps? Great. I see more hands this year than I did the year before and that's great. People are realizing, first of all, it's free, and we like free. So if you don't have a Gmail account yet, go and sign up and get your own Gmail account, and then all sorts of doors open for you. So use Google Drive to communicate with parents and to communicate with students. You could create that same KWHL table in Drive. And then what I love about Drive and use with all my students is the ability to share it. And so just the other day in class, I made a Drive document. I sent the link to all my students, and we all collaborated on that Drive document. We worked together, and they love it because you can see their names and everyone's working together. So use Google Drive. It's a great option. Lots of great workshops here I saw on using Google. Share it with students and parents. Parents want to know. Parents want to know where we're going with this. What should I be looking for? And it's a great way to communicate with parents. Folders, that's a great way to communicate with parents, but emails and those kinds of things, parents want to know and be involved for the most part. I know that's not always true. And then collaboration to create our class goals. What's our goal for this subject? What do we want to all know or be able to do about this brand new subject by the time we're done? Let's get our brains thinking, let's see what we're going to do and where we're going to go with this. Here's a program called Kidspiration. And Kidspiration is from the Inspiration family of software. And I just took that KWHL idea and put it in here. So it's very kid-friendly. It has all these clip art, which they love. And so we've got insects. What do I know? What do I want to know? How will I learn it? And what I learned. So Kidspiration is a great tool that you can use for students to, again, get them involved in setting their own objectives. And then MindMeister has a free basic subscription. It allows you to brainstorm also, and it allows you to share. The takeaway from here is technology changes so quickly, doesn't it? And so my takeaway here, although you can write these names down and this different software, is just to get into your mind there's things out there. Because no sooner do we master something than what? Something better comes out. And so that's really got to be the concept. Okay, these are the strategies that work. Here are some tech tools that are available now, but I'm always going to be looking for something better to help me with this strategy. So MindMeister is a great tool too. Now let's get to the second part of that. It was setting objectives, and then there was a second part, and providing feedback. Feedback is super important. Research shows that feedback generally produces positive results. And the idea is that the closer students receive the feedback to the time they did the task, the more effective. So the grading, and I work with online instructors and we talk about this all the time. We have to grade that homework and get it back to them. In our online classes, we try to get daily homework back within 24 hours. For projects that's longer, because we know that we've got to get that back to them. How will they know what to improve on if they don't get their work to see what they did wrong and if they don't get the feedback? So feedback is super important. How many of you remember spending like weeks writing this paper? You poured blood, sweat, and tears into the paper, and you get it back, and at the top, there's an A and nothing else. And you almost feel a little deflated. What? That's it? That's all I got back? Feedback helps us know what we did well and what we can do to improve. And as students, knowing both of those things really helps us to improve and to become better. Okay, so when providing feedback, here are some recommendations. First of all, provide feedback that addresses what is correct and elaborates on what students need to do next. So we're not just going to focus on everything they did wrong. We're going to focus on, okay, these are some things that you did right. Good job. Keep doing that. Don't forget that. But then let's focus on this too. It is time consuming. And there's always trying to find different ways to do it. In one of my classes, I've started to record my feedback and just send them the audio recording, because I was finding that I would spend forever typing it out, and then I'd have to go back and edit to make sure there aren't any spelling errors, because students just love getting something from a teacher that has a spelling error. So then I'd edit it. So I just started recording my feedback and giving that to them. Now, I maybe have that liberty to email that to them, and we have that in place. I know that providing feedback is a time investment, but I think when we provide really good feedback, then we're going to see good results in learning too. Oops, let me go back. Keep feedback timely and specific. We can't wait and stockpile all those papers, right? We got to keep grading, and I know that you all know that all too well. And it has to be specific feedback. And encourage students in the feedback process. We're all in this together, and not one of us has arrived, right? So getting feedback is a good thing because we're becoming better. And feedback helps us to know where we need to improve. And so sometimes putting the emphasis more on the feedback than the letter grade is helpful. Some of us, all of us maybe I can't speak for you, but I was pretty fixated with grades, and maybe you were too, through high school and into college. And although that was a driving force, really my emphasis should have shifted a little bit to, okay, how can I become better? Give me some feedback to help me improve, because we all need to improve in whatever area we are in. All right, so I love this one. Socrative. Has anybody used Socrative? Oh, good. Oh, you have. Good. Do you like it? It's fun. What level do you teach?
I teach high school.
Yes, it's very good for high school. Socrative is fun. It's a smart student response system that empowers teachers to engage their classrooms through a series of educational exercises. And I'll show you. Let me ask you about your students. Do they have devices they're allowed to bring to class?
Yes.
And what kinds? Is it bring your own device, or what do you guys?
Bring your own. Most of them we encourage to get Chromebooks.
Okay, Chromebooks. So this is what Socrative is and how it works. Basically, as a teacher, you go in and set up an account, and you'll set up a room. And that room is highlighted up there in the yellow. So that's the room number. Then the students go to Socrative. They log in as a student, and they don't have to put their information in. And it will ask them what room number. And so the student will write in your room number for your room. And then there's all sorts of things. You can create what they call an exit ticket. So let's say you just lectured forever on the French Revolution. 40 minutes have gone by, and you wonder if they learned anything. Well, you can have them complete an exit ticket through Socrative that asks them a few questions and lets you know what, they didn't learn everything. Next time we come to class, I need to address this a little differently. You can do all sorts of things. And so let me show you. So you can do welcome to Socrative, enter your teacher's room below. This is what it looks like for the student. Notice they don't have to put any of their information in. They just put the room number. And how well did you understand today's material? And they answer a quick question and goes on. This provides feedback for you, the teacher, on your teaching, so that when you come to class the next time, you can redirect. And you can say, wow, they did not get this concept. Or they got this, we can move on. So this is a great way to do it. You say, well, my students don't have devices. Let me still encourage you to do something like that, an exit ticket of some sort. Do you do something like that?
Flickers.
Okay.
It's free, and you don't have to have devices, but it gives you the same kind of thing on the screen.
And so does the student just writes it down on a piece of paper?
No, flickers you print out like it kind of looks like the old eye chart ease, but they're all different funny things. They hold it up.
Okay.
And you turn your A, B, C, D.
So you get a quick response.
And then you scan it with your phone or tablet.
Okay.
You only need one device.
Great.
But
So
you get the same thing.
same
You get
results.
charts with names.
It's great. So that's another example of another tech tool. Tell everybody what it is, Plickers? Okay, good. So the idea here, the concept is teacher gets feedback and can redirect teaching. Technology will change. It'll change within a year. Let's keep the concept in mind that we want to get feedback so we can redirect teaching. Here's another one. Oh, I love this one. Remind 101. So if you haven't looked into this, do. I started to use this with my students. A lot of times we send emails to parents, but have you ever had a parent say, you know what, I don't have time to check my email, could you text me? So what Remind 101 is, you set up a room as a teacher, you send the link to the parents click on it, and the parents can decide how they would like to receive information from you, through a text or through an email. And so you set it up in the system. It keeps their information private, it keeps your information private, so they don't need to know your cell phone number. And then the parent gets the information the way they want to receive it. So I've started to use this in my college classes. They prefer, most of them, to get a text message. And so I'll send out a quick message, it goes to their phone, and they're reminded. Remind 101, it's totally free, and it's a great way for you to give information to parents or even to students at a higher level, okay? So look into that. It's a great little tech tool. Let's go into number 3. What was the first one? Good. What was the second one? Very good. And number 3 is non-linguistic representations. What? Well, non-linguistic representations has to do with this. Language is stored in 2 forms. In the linguistic form, which is language, and in the non-linguistic form, which is mental images and physical sensations. The more individuals use both types of representation, the better they are able to reflect on and recall knowledge. So it's this idea of using pictures. Now, we know all about using pictures, right? You recognize this? Yes. Okay, so we give this to a student, what, kindergarten? And we help them make the relationship between A says, like, and then we show them a picture of an apple. So we've got the linguistic and the non-linguistic part there. And we go all the way down. Why do we do that with little guys? Why? Because it helps them remember. Why do we quit doing that with students? Right around 3rd grade, 4th grade, suddenly we go more towards text and fewer pictures. But God has designed our mind in such a way that we need text, but most of us learn best when we also have pictures. Now remember, we've probably talked about, and you've probably been to workshops on different learning styles, right? Well, what they now know and realize about learning styles is that almost all of us, unless we have some sort of visual impairment, learn best when we have images in some sort of pictures, because non-linguistic representations have been proven not only to stimulate but also increase brain activity. So we use pictures with our little guys to help them remember. But we old guys, like you and me, you're not old, I am, we need pictures still to help us remember things. And so think about that. This is a highly effective instructional strategy, using non-linguistic representations, making things visual, helping students to create mental images. So we can use graphic organizers. So if we're reading a complicated text in a history book, how can we take that out and make a graphic organizer so they better understand what they just read in a visual format? Make physical models or manipulatives. So they're actually manipulating and making something physical. Generating mental pictures. We talk about this in reading. Good readers, when they read, they generate mental pictures. Not all readers, poor struggling readers, don't always do that. So we have to teach a poor struggling reader how to generate mental images, because mental images help us remember. It's the way God has designed our brain. And then also create pictures and illustrations. I did this in class the other day. We were reading 13 strategies for using picture books in the classroom. So we had 13. So I divided them into groups, gave them each a strategy, and they had to draw a visual depiction of that. And it hurt their brains. It was hard. It was not an easy task to take this text and to demonstrate it with a picture. And so it's a great learning task to try to represent something visually. So what are some tech tools? I got word processing up there still, clip art, graphics, all sorts of things that are readily available. Spreadsheet software, any math teachers? Doesn't it make sense and help people when they see the numbers and then you generate some sort of graph from it? You go, oh, the pie chart. Oh, I understand the relationship between those numbers now. I have a visual understanding. Digital microscopes. Anybody have a digital microscope? Very cool. Maybe put that on your technology committee wish list for a digital microscope. It helps us understand and make mental images. All right, I've been talking for a while. Turn and talk, and this is a hard one. Think about something that you teach that you know your students struggle with, some sort of concept. Is there a way that you could use non-linguistic representations to help them better understand it? Turn and talk to the people next to you. It's a hard one. What do I teach that I know they struggle with? Can we represent it in pictures? Okay. Oh, do you have an idea? All right, I got to cut. Anybody have an idea? I know, short. Only one person got to talk. Anybody have an idea? Someone tell me something your students routinely struggle with. Anybody come up with something? Yes.
Kinetic energy.
Okay, how can we make that visual? Did you come up with an idea? Oh. How can we make that visual? Kinetic energy, huh?
Just throwing something.
Throwing something, that's a visual image I'll never forget. Throwing the egg in the air, right? Okay. So all sorts of ideas. So the takeaway here is, okay, I know they're going to struggle with this. How can we make it visual?
What about linking verbs?
Linking verbs. Anybody have an idea that you've made linking verbs visual?
The subject and the predicate noun are the same thing. Tom is the coach. The coach is Tom. And I do this with my hands every time.
So we're getting some kinetic, what?
It holds them together.
I was thinking of a train and the connections between a train. All right, good. Here are some tech tools. I'm a fan of Google. Google Sky. Have you ever looked at Google Sky? Anybody teach us about space? And then there's another great app that you put on your phone. You hold up to the sky, and you can actually see the stars in the sky. Google Maps. If you haven't downloaded and used Google Maps, do. There's a great website called Google Lit Trips. And what they've done is taken a whole bunch of classic literature, Make Way for Ducklings, and they've mapped it in Boston as to where it actually happened. So you can go and see the street and the pond and everything where Make Way for Ducklings is. So Google Lit Trips is a great idea. History.com, it's history.co, is a great website for timelines. So you make a timeline, then you pull in pictures, and then you have students do a little summary. It's free. Scratch. Anybody use Scratch? MIT created it, and it's basically a programming tool at a very basic level. Let me show you some pictures. This is Google Lit Trips for Make Way for Ducklings, and so it shows the pond where they actually rested. They have a lot of books on there, some you would not like, but you may be able to find some that you do like on there. Google Lit Trips, look it up, free. Google Sky, or any of those apps that show the sky. How awesome is that I could see, because I could never see it in class on my book. I never quite got it, but you're telling me that star is right there right now? So use those apps. History.com that I just told you, .co I should say, not .com. Great interactive timelines, and shows you that. And then Scratch is a great website. Kids like it, boys like it, and girls. This is an example. They've been learning about meandering, and if this was live, we would press on that, and there'd be animation there. And the students actually program this to share their concept. All of these are great things that are free. And Watch, Know, Learn is a great way to find videos that you can show. Don't forget about using videos to help make things visual. All right, resources. Using technology with classroom instruction that works is a great textbook. And if you have a moment, I'd love to hear from you with Socrates. If you need to get going, you can. I think our time has come to an end. But Socrates is the one I just introduced you to. You could go to Socrates and log in, and here's my class code, CEA29A13, or you can move on to your next workshop. Thank you so much for coming.